Hey everybody, welcome to episode 1 of editing my previously published and distributed book. If you're wondering why it was previously published and distributed, I'll leave a link to the original video down below, but long story short, my publisher closed their doors for good, which means my book, A Light in the Night, will only be distributed through June of 2026. So I'm taking this opportunity now that the rights have returned back to me to edit the book, hopefully make it a lot better, and then hopefully republish a newer edition that lives up to the standards I hold myself to today. So without further ado, here is chapter 1, page 1, edits of A Light in the Night. All right, let's get to the edits. Okay, we're going to try to go through these quick as there's quite a few and I don't want this to take forever, so I'm just going to kind of give a brief overview of what my intentions were behind each edit so you can kind of understand my thinking behind them. First sentence, Tara struggled to keep her balance, the earth beneath her feet a treacherous tangle of roots and leaves as she ran up the incline. I like this sentence, I think it's good, but there is one word that I can remove here, which is feet. Feet doesn't really add anything. The earth beneath her is obviously the earth beneath her feet, so it's an unneeded word, can remove that, help the sentence out a little bit. So now the new updated sentence is, Tara struggled to keep her balance, the earth beneath her a treacherous tangle of roots and leaves as she ran up the incline. The next couple sentences I decided to leave alone, I thought they were fine as is, which is, her calves burned, her lungs gasped for air. In these moments, rare and fleeting, she couldn't help but wonder if being a dwarf had its disadvantages. I think all those convey what I want them to convey. I like their overall structure, so I left them as is. The next bit changed pretty heavily. The original sentence was, she barely processed the thought before the olden wolf snapping at her heels forced her desperate escape to continue. This has been updated to, the thought passed quickly though as the olden wolf, dashing with an uneven gait, demanded her attention. It moves with such swiftness, she noted as she glimpsed it bounding up the hill. I didn't like the word processed in the original sentence, so I removed that. Processed feels modern, so it felt like it pulled you out of the story a little bit. So I took processed out, changed that out. Also changed up the overall structure. In my opinion, it flows a little bit more smoothly, a little bit easier to read, a little bit easier to speak aloud. Also added dashing with an uneven gait. I felt this was important as it helped provide the reader a mental image of how the olden wolf is moving. There's not a lot of description of what an olden wolf looks like in this first page, so I felt important to help portray a little bit better of an idea of what it looks like to the reader, so they have a little bit better picture in their mind, especially as the olden wolf is a creature that has a lot of relevance later on in the story. So I wanted to help provide that here. And then lastly, the extra sentence that I added, it moves with such swiftness, she noted, as she glimpsed it bounding up the hill. I just felt that this helped connect our first paragraph, this is the end of our first paragraph, to the start of our second paragraph. So, start of the second paragraph. The thick trees of the Crest Mountains muffled the sound of the olden wolf, but slowly Tara began to hear the quiet panting as the creature gained on her. This has been updated to, the thick foliage of the Crest Mountains muffled the sounds, but Tara began to hear the panting of the creature as it approached. So overall general idea was I think this flows a little bit better, the sentence restructure. I just changed out thick trees for thick foliage. I don't want people to get the feeling that there are only trees. There should be moss, grass, other foliage, other fauna. Or sorry, not fauna, other flora in the forest. It's not just trees. This is more of a Pacific Northwest style jungle. So not quite vines and super thick grass, impossible to walk through, but a lot more than what you would have, say, in parts of the Rocky Mountain range here in the United States and northern Canada. So it gives you a little bit more of that Pacific Northwest feel. So that's why I swapped out thick trees for foliage. Next sentence was, then she began to feel its large paws landing lightly on every leaf and pine needle that came underfoot, avoiding their dangerous snap. I updated this to, then she began to feel the earth shake underfoot as the weight of each large paw struck the ground in rhythm. So I think this gives a better indication of the Olden Ulf's size. The original one makes it feel a little bit smaller. If it's not snapping pine needles and crunching leaves, I think that portrayed more of it's a tiny creature and less of it's a moving with grace. So I feel this new updated sentence kind of gives it more of that weight. You get a better idea of how large this creature is if the earth is shaking underfoot, right? I think the animal that probably comes the most to mind about the earth shaking under you is most likely horses. Like when horses gallop on the ground, you can feel that. So you get kind of a better indication of the size of this creature. The next sentence, then she began to fear. And yet, even in the swirling chaos, Tara could only marvel at the creature's quiet movement. So I left the first part. Then she began to fear. Or I guess that's technically the first sentence. I left. Then she began to fear. Didn't update that. Second sentence. And yet, even in the swirling chaos, Tara could only appreciate the silence in which the Olden Ulf gave chase. 1. I think this flows better. I think it reads easier. It also avoids the use of the word marvel, which marvel has a lot of more modern connotations. I think it's associated with superheroes because of Marvel Comics. Or at least in my mind, it's associated a little bit more with Marvel Comics. So I kind of wanted to avoid that association. So I feel as if this is a better way to structure that. The next sentence. To those who have no eyes, the mountains are as silent as the hills, she remembered. This has been updated to those who have no eyes, the mountains are as quiet as the hills, she remembered her mother once saying. The original lacked that attribution of the quote to her mother. I realized while rewriting this that she makes very little mention of her mother. And while writing the sequel to this book and writing the prequel to this book, I realized there would be a lot more mention of her mother. So that is one of the things I am focusing on during this rewrite of the book, is adding in a little bit more, or adding in more nods to her mother. And this would also be something that her mother would say and would be a quote. And you kind of learn more about that in the subsequent books. Okay, on to the next sentence and next paragraph. We're not gonna make it, Finner shouted at her, his accent so thick that it nearly made the words beyond recognition. This has been updated to, we're not gonna make it. I apologize, by the way, about my bad accent. We're not gonna make it, Finner shouted at her, fear turning his accent almost beyond recognition. I just feel as if this flows a little bit better, reads a little bit better, especially out loud. A glance, and then on to the next sentence. A glance behind them, and Tara saw the truth of what Finner had said. This has been updated to another glance behind them, and Tara realized he was right. Just a small update. I didn't like how the original read, saw the truth of what Finner had said. That felt a little clunky. That felt like I was trying a little too hard to make it sound, I don't know, educated. It doesn't really read smooth, in my opinion. So just a small update, simplified the sentence. I think it reads better. Then it goes, I added a new sentence. Well, actually, my apologies. I didn't add a new sentence. I just updated the next sentence. The next sentence is, the Olden Ulf was barely 10 meters away and gaining. This has been updated to Maren Unkar still lay nearly a kilometer away, and the Olden Ulf was barely 30 meters back and gaining. So, what is this update for? It adds the reference to Maren Unkar, which is where the story is taking place at the beginning. Right, this is the main dwarven city. So we kind of get more of that point of reference that we can associate to later. It also gives you an idea of what is Finner talking about when he says we're not going to make it. Make what? Make it where? That's like kind of a hanging sentence. It's not super necessary, right? You get the idea that they're trying to escape, but this gives a little bit more context. It also gives you context about how hopeless they are, right? They're over a kilometer, nearly a kilometer away, but the Olden Wolf is only 30 meters back. So the Olden Wolf is pretty close. Random car, super far. Olden Wolf feels as if it's running fast. They feel like they're struggling running uphill. Kind of gives you that better frame of reference. I also pushed it back 30 meters as it gives a little bit more of a realistic time for the next couple scenes to happen. And then the next sentence is, if it weren't for the trees, it would have already gotten to us, she realized, as she caught glimpses of the bearhound weaving through the thick trunks that appeared in its path. This has been updated too. If it weren't for the trees, it would have already gotten to us, she realized, as she caught sight of the bearhound weaving through the thick trunks that appeared in its path, its broad shoulders forcing a haphazard route through the thick forest. So just added on a little bit to the end of that sentence, that its broad shoulders forcing a haphazard route through the thick forest. This felt relevant because it kind of gives the reader the sense of like, why is this animal struggling to run through the forest? Doesn't it live here? No. And you kind of learn later on in the story that Olden Wolves aren't usually seen this far down the mountain. And this is relevant, right? It's thicker foliage this far down the mountain. An animal of this size has a hard time moving through a forest like that. So this kind of gives you that indication as a reader that maybe this isn't where that animal belongs. And we connect that later on. The next sentence. When I say to cover your eyes, Tara shouted, taking a moment to prepare herself. I updated this to, when I say to cover your eyes, Tara shouted. Then she stopped running and took a moment to prepare herself. So she stops running, right? That's like the big change here. Tara has a lot of ego. This is something that you learn about her throughout the story. She's very prideful, and her pride gets her in trouble. Her pride costs her a lot, but that pride means that she won't die running away. That's not something that she would do. She would rather stand and fight than flee in terror, right? She doesn't want to flee. She doesn't want to die. She's not suicidal, but she doesn't want to die running. She would rather die standing her ground. So this just kind of adds a little bit more characterization. It's just a small thing, but I feel like it adds a lot. Let's see. Then this next bit, I'm kind of going to go in one big thing because a lot of it changed. So the original is, she glanced back. The Olden Wolf was only 7 meters behind her now. She stole another glance. Only 5 meters. Then one last glance. 3 meters. This is it, she thought, as she shouted, now. This has been updated to Finner paused in confusion, fear keeping him quiet and hope keeping him by her side. Words formed themselves in her mind. Durag bless me, she thought. She caught sight of the Olden Wolf, teeth bared. It was only 20 meters away now. She took a deep breath. I may see you soon, mother. Only 10 meters. One last breath. 5 meters. This is it, she thought, then shouted, now. So this adds a little bit of characterization for Finner, her friend, right? He is scared and confused, but he's not willing to leave her side. Now, he has hope in her, but he also that's not the type of person that he is. He wouldn't go running in fear. He trusts her, right? He trusts her so unconditionally that he is willing to stop, even though he is scared and confused. He's willing to stop because she told him to. So he's not willing to flee. Overall, the rest of it, I think that repetition flows better. I think it feels better, especially spoken aloud. And then we have the one last mention of her mother with, I may see you soon, mother. I think that's a good addition there. As it gives kind of another nod. And also you get the feeling as a reader that her mother is no longer alive. And then The original, she and Finner shut their eyes, continuing to speak in a hurried voice. Terra said, Lun Arda me van Dunle. The world flashed a brilliant note of white. Then everything went dark, cold, and silent. This has been updated to, this is it, she shouted, or she thought, then shouted, now. She wrapped her arms around her eyes, and she felt Finner bury his face into her shoulder. Speaking in a powerful voice, Terra said, Lun Arda me van Dunle. The world flashed a brilliant, blazing white. Then for Terra, everything went dark and cold and silent. So you get Finner burying his face into her shoulder, so that just adds a little bit more visualization for the reader. You kind of get what's happening, right? She's wrapping her arms around her eyes. You get the update to speaking in a powerful voice, not in a hurried voice, right? Again, this goes back to kind of the ego thing. Terra is, you realize, she's casting a spell, right? She's speaking in a different language, and she's casting a spell. She has ego. She knows her magic, to some degree, has power, and she's going to believe in that. And she's going to cast that spell with a powerful voice. She might die, but she's not going to necessarily rush this. She has too much confidence in herself to rush it, so she's going to speak it in a powerful voice. And then the world flashed a brilliant blazing white. I like blazing white instead of note of white. I feel like that's better visualization. Reads a little bit better. Spoken aloud is a little bit better. And then I have, then for Terra, everything went dark and cold and silent. Originally it just said, then everything, which isn't accurate. It's mainly for Terra, everything goes dark and cold and silent. The world doesn't go cold and dark and silent. Dark and cold, silent. So yeah, that is the first page and a sentence of the book getting revised. And now that we've gone through the first page line by line, I thought I'd do one last read aloud, everything combined together, so you can see it all in one spot, how it's been changed, and the updates that I've made. So, here is the original page. Chapter 1, A Strange Encounter. Terra struggled to keep her balance, the earth beneath her feet a treacherous tangle of roots and leaves as she ran up the incline. Her calves burned, her lungs gasped for air. In these moments, rare and fleeting, she couldn't help but wonder if being a dwarf had its disadvantages. She barely processed the thought before the Olden Wolf, snapping at her heels, forced her desperate escape to continue. The thick trees of the Crest Mountains muffled the sound of the Olden Wolf, but slowly Terra began to hear the quiet panting as the creature gained on her. Then she began to feel its large paws landing lightly on every leaf and pine needle that came underfoot, avoiding their dangerous snap. Then she began to fear, and yet, even in the swirling chaos, Terra could only marvel at the creature's quiet movement. To those who have no eyes, the mountains are as silent as the hills, she remembered. We're not gonna make it, Finner shouted at her, his accent so thick that it nearly made the words beyond recognition. A glance behind them and Terra saw the truth of what Finner had said. The Olden Wolf was barely 10 meters away, and gaining. If it weren't for the trees, it would have already gotten to us, she realized as she caught glimpses of the bear hound weaving through the thick trunks that appeared in its path. When I say to cover your eyes, Terra shouted, taking a moment to prepare herself. I hope this works, she thought. She glanced back. The Olden Wolf was only 7 meters behind now. She stole another glance, only 5 meters. Then one last glance, 3 meters. This is it, she thought, as she shouted, now! She and Finner shut their eyes, and continuing to speak in a hurried voice, Terra said, Lun Arda me van Dunle. The world flashed a brilliant note of white, then everything went dark, cold, and silent. And here is the updated page. Chapter 1, A Strange Encounter. Terra struggled to keep her balance, the earth beneath her a treacherous tangle of roots and leaves as she ran up the incline. Her calves burned, her lungs gasped for air, and in these moments, rare and fleeting, she couldn't help but wonder if being a dwarf had its disadvantages. The thought passed quickly, though, as the Olden Wolf, dashing with an uneven gait, demanded her attention. It moves with such swiftness, she noted as she glimpsed it bounding up the hill. The thick foliage of the Crest Mountains muffled the sounds, but Terra began to hear the panting of the creature as it approached. Then she began to feel the earth shake underfoot as the weight of each large paw struck the ground in rhythm. Then she began to fear. And yet, even in the swirling chaos, Terra could only appreciate the silence in which the Golden Wolf gave chase. To those who have no eyes, the mountains are as quiet as the hills, she remembered her mother once saying. We're not going to make it, Finner shouted at her, fear turning his accent almost beyond recognition. Another glance behind them and Terra realized he was right. Maranunkar still lay nearly a kilometer away, and the Golden Wolf was barely 30 meters back, and gaining. If it weren't for the trees, it would have already gotten to us, she realized as she caught sight of the bear hound weaving through the thick trunks that appeared in its path, its broad shoulders forcing a haphazard route through the thick forest. When I say to, cover your eyes, Terra shouted. Then she stopped running and took a moment to prepare herself. Finner paused in confusion, fear keeping him quiet and hope keeping him by her side. Words formed themselves in her mind. Durak bless me, she thought. She caught sight of the Golden Wolf, teeth bared. It was only 20 meters away now. She took a deep breath. I may see you soon, Mother. Only 10 meters. One last breath. 5 meters. This is it, she thought, then shouted, now! She wrapped her arms around her eyes, and she felt Finner bury his face into her shoulder. Speaking in a powerful voice, Terra said, Lunarda Mevandunle. The world flashed a brilliant, blazing white. Then for Terra, everything went dark and cold and silent. There's the updated chapter for you guys. I hope you guys learned something, and more importantly, I hope I learned something. I hope the video is enjoyable. I hope you get a glimpse into kind of my thought process, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Until then, thank you so much, and bye-bye.